The truth hiding behind the polished smiles of the Indiana Fever front office is far darker than anything being fed to the public, and if you look closely enough, the cracks are impossible to ignore. This isn't about basketball decisions anymore. This is a full-scale internal power struggle dressed up as professionalism. The narrative being pushed by executives like Amber Cox, Kelly Krauskopf, and head coach Stephanie White is carefully engineered to keep fans distracted while something far more calculated unfolds beneath the surface. They want you to believe that prioritizing Kelsey Mitchell is just smart roster building, but in reality, it signals a dangerous shift, one that directly undermines the generational force sitting right in front of them. Because this isn't just any player we're talking about, this is Caitlin Clark, the single most transformative figure women's basketball has ever seen. A player who didn't just elevate a franchise but dragged an entire league into global relevance. The arenas are packed because of her, the ratings exploded because of her, the money flows because of her, and yet somehow, the organization is publicly positioning someone else as the priority. That's not strategy, that's a statement. A statement that reveals fear, ego, and a desperate attempt to control something that has already grown far beyond them. Because when a franchise starts acting like it's bigger than the player who built its entire modern identity, you're no longer watching team building, you're watching the early stages of collapse disguised as confidence. And the deeper you go, the more calculated it starts to look. This isn't just about favoritism or coaching philosophy, this is about money, power, and control at the highest level. The looming financial reality tied to the next WNBA contract structure creates a scenario where greatness becomes expensive, and dominance comes with a price tag the organization may not want to pay. If Caitlin Clark reaches MVP status, the financial implications explode, and suddenly, the same player who generates the most value becomes the biggest problem on the balance sheet. That's where things turn from questionable to deeply unsettling. Because if a player's success becomes financially inconvenient, the easiest way to control the cost is to control the player. Slow the system down. Shift the offense. Limit the touches. Reframe the narrative in the media. Push team balance while quietly suppressing individual dominance. It's subtle, it's strategic, and it's incredibly dangerous, because it risks destroying the very engine that drives everything forward. Meanwhile, the illusion of control grows stronger inside the organization, convincing decision-makers that they can replicate success without fully embracing the force that created it. But the reality is brutally simple: fans aren't emotionally invested in logos, they're invested in greatness, and if that greatness feels restricted, disrespected, or strategically minimized, the backlash won't be quiet, it will be explosive. What we're potentially witnessing isn't just mismanagement, it's a high-stakes gamble where ego is being placed above inevitability. And history has never been kind to organizations that try to outsmart a generational phenomenon. And what makes this situation even more volatile is the psychological layer unfolding behind closed doors, because when an organization begins to feel threatened by the very star that fuels its existence, the decisions stop being logical and start becoming emotional. Inside the structure of the Indiana Fever, there are clear signs of a hierarchy struggling to maintain control in the face of overwhelming external pressure created by Caitlin Clark's meteoric rise. This is what happens when a player doesn't just outperform expectations, but completely rewrites them. Suddenly, veterans feel overshadowed, leadership feels challenged, and executives feel replaceable. And instead of fully embracing that shift and building a system that amplifies her once-in-a-generation playmaking gravity, the organization appears to be leaning into a more conservative, controlled structure centered around Kelsey Mitchell. A move that on the surface looks stable, but underneath signals hesitation, fear, and an unwillingness to fully commit to a new era. Because committing to Clark doesn't just mean giving her the ball, it means surrendering control to a style of play that is fast, unpredictable, and impossible to micromanage. It means trusting a player whose vision operates at a speed most systems can't contain. And for an establishment that thrives on structure, predictability, and authority, that level of chaos feels threatening. So instead of unlocking her full capacity, the system subtly tightens around her. Possessions slow down, offensive freedom gets reframed as recklessness, and the narrative begins to shift from generational talent to needs development, planting seeds of doubt in the exact moment dominance should be embraced. But here's where the entire equation becomes unsustainable, because you cannot contain a player whose impact exists far beyond the court itself. Caitlin Clark is not just producing highlights, she is driving an entire economic ecosystem, and that kind of influence cannot be quietly redirected or strategically minimized without consequences. The fans see it, the media feels it, and the market responds to it in real time. If the WNBA continues to surge in visibility, engagement, and revenue, it will be directly tied to players who expand the game, not contain it. And if the Indiana Fever fails to align itself with that reality, the fallout won't just be internal, it will be public, loud, and impossible to ignore. Because in modern sports, power has shifted. It no longer sits solely in boardrooms or coaching offices, it lives in influence, in audience connection, in cultural impact. And Clark has all three at a level that forces organizations to either evolve or fall behind. If the front office continues down a path where control is prioritized over optimization, where short-term comfort is chosen over long-term dominance, then what we're witnessing won't just be a missed opportunity, it will be a case study in how not to handle a generational asset. Because eventually, talent at that level doesn't just adapt to systems, it outgrows them. And when that moment comes, the choice won't be about offensive schemes or roster priorities anymore. It will be about whether the organization was ever truly capable of understanding what it had in the first place. And now the situation reaches its most dangerous phase, the point where perception starts turning into reality, and narratives begin shaping outcomes before the games are even played. Because once doubt is planted around a player like Caitlin Clark, it doesn't just sit quietly in the background, it spreads, it multiplies, and it becomes a tool. Every missed shot gets magnified, every turnover gets dissected, every moment of hesitation gets labeled as a flaw instead of a natural part of high-usage brilliance. Meanwhile, the structure around her continues to subtly shift in ways that dilute her natural strengths, fewer transition opportunities, more forced half-court sets, a slower tempo that neutralizes her instinctive playmaking edge. And while this is happening, the spotlight quietly pivots toward Kelsey Mitchell, whose role becomes more central, more controlled, more aligned with the system the coaching staff feels comfortable managing. On paper, it looks balanced. In reality, it's a reallocation of power. Because basketball at its highest level isn't just about equal distribution, it's about maximizing the player who bends the game itself. And when that player is asked to operate within constraints designed for someone else, the entire ecosystem becomes inefficient. What you're left with is a team that looks organized but feels limited, structured but lacking explosiveness, disciplined but missing the unpredictable spark that separates contenders from icons. And here's the part that organizations often fail to calculate: the external pressure doesn't disappear, it intensifies. The audience isn't blind anymore. Fans, analysts, and even casual viewers can sense when something doesn't align. They can feel when a generational talent is being underutilized, when the flow of the game doesn't match the potential on the floor. And in today's hyper-connected sports environment, that awareness turns into conversation, conversation turns into criticism, and criticism turns into a narrative that the Indiana Fever cannot control. The WNBA is entering a phase where visibility is higher than ever, and with that visibility comes accountability. If the system continues to suppress what should be unleashed, the backlash won't just impact locker room morale, it will affect branding, fan loyalty, and long-term trust. Because when people invest emotionally in a player like Clark, they expect to see evolution, dominance, and freedom, not restriction. And if that expectation is repeatedly denied, the shift is inevitable. Attention moves. Loyalty shifts. Narratives flip. What was once excitement becomes frustration, and what was once support becomes scrutiny. At that point, the organization isn't just managing a roster anymore, it's managing a perception crisis. And history shows that once a team